You want to talk about a nightmare cruise scenario? Take a look at this. All right, let me set the stage. This is my friend Jamie from Sharing at Sea. This was a video they recently posted to their channel. You got to go check it out for all of the deets, but the opening says it all.
What's going on, everybody? It's your friend Jamie here from the Sharing at Sea Travel YouTube channel, and I am on the Carnival Pride, guys, and we are stuck here in the middle of the sea.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to La Lido Loca. I'm your host, Tony, here to talk you through everything going on in cruising. And yeah, these scenarios play out in cruising all the time, but it really does hit home when you know somebody going through the scenario. And that's certainly the case when I think about what's going on with the Carnival Pride with my friends Jamie and Sharon. And then another friend, Jay from the Ship Life, also being impacted by this deal going on with the Pride. Let me start by saying this. There is a resolution at hand. The folks on the Pride are no longer stuck out in the middle of the Baltic. You got to go watch Jamie's video because he takes you all the way through the beginning of the issue, all the way through the resolution. And they also talk about, you know, the compensation that they're getting, what Carnival is doing for them in this scenario. But the one thing that they talked about in the video was that during this process, there were some people that were getting anxious, that they were feeling stressed out about the situation. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And I also want to talk about a few nightmare cruise scenarios. One that I've been in, I'll save that till the end. I did have some trepidation on one of my cruises. I'll save that, but we'll go through the other nightmare scenarios. But first, let's talk about what has happened. 12-day cruise out of Dover in the UK, round trip, supposed to return to Dover in the UK. Day 10, something goes wrong with the engine or the Asiapod. Something goes wrong mechanically on the Carnival Pride, and it breaks down. It gets stuck in the middle of the Baltic. The goal is to return the ship to its closest port of call, which is Kiel, Germany, where they just were, and they need some assistance. I won't spoil the assistance because there's some really great footage of how they got back to Kiel over there in the Sharing at Sea video. So they're making their way back, but now you've got these a couple thousand passengers in Kiel, Germany, when all of their travel plans take off from Dover. So now you got to get from Germany back to the UK. How is that going to work out? It's an interesting story. I would encourage you to go check it out. And then another story that's out there, Jay from the Ship Life. He was supposed to be on the next cruise on the Carnival Pride. It's been canceled on the 29th. And unfortunately, Jay had already made his way over to Dover. So go check out Jay's story on the Ship Life channel. Both scenarios are crazy. How would you react if you're stuck at sea? How would you react if your cruise got canceled and you were already in Europe and you've already made your way to your port of call? How will they deal with it? I'll let both of them tell their story. But the only takeaway I had from listening to both of their stories is make sure you've got some good travel insurance. But like I said, the thing I keyed into on the Sharing at Sea video is that there were people on board that had some anxiety when this was going down, like what was going to happen to them. There has been a scenario where a cruise ship lost power, was stuck at sea, passengers on board for several days, having all kinds of trouble with heat and, bathroom issues, that kind of thing. And so I think there is a precedent for some sort of trepidation if you're a cruise passenger on there. Let's talk about the big nightmare scenarios and go through this list with me in your mind and tell me whether you're actually concerned about it or not. I'll tell you my thoughts on it. Number one, I am afraid that the ship will sink. Is that something that goes through your mind when you're cruising? Me personally, it does not. There are a couple ships that have sunk famously. Of course, the Titanic sank back in the 1911, I think it was. And then more recently, we had the Costa Concordia sink through negligence of the captain. But yeah, so there is some examples of cruise ships sinking, but if you compare that to the number of cruise ships that don't sink, the millions of trips and passengers, all that kind of stuff, if you compare those two, then the idea, the risk of your cruise ship sinking, while not zero, is so minuscule, at least for me, it doesn't rise to the level of concern. Nightmare scenario number 2, fire on ships. We do hear stories about fires on ships. To me, that's a greater concern because there's more vectors of risk there. There's more opportunities for fires. But also, I know for sure, and I've seen it play out, there is extensive fire prevention measures in place on cruise ships. The crew is trained for fire prevention. One scenario that I was a part of, it was on the Wonder of the Seas on its inaugural sailing. Something triggered the fire alarm in the main promenade, and these big, huge steel doors, the sprinklers came on, and these big, huge steel doors, boom, the fire barrier came. I'd never seen anything like that, and it was huge because it was on the world's largest cruise ship. So, fire is a real thing. I'm not super concerned about it because I know all of the things that are in place for it, but that's not to minimize it. That's just to say that while fire is a concern, there is so much effort put into fire prevention that I have a good comfort that fire on a ship, there's a plan in place for most scenarios. Cruise nightmare scenario number 3, one we've kind of already talked about, is the one that happened to the Pride, stuck at sea for any period of time because of mechanical issue, power failure, that kind of thing. Again, there are real examples to suggest that a cruise ship could get stuck at sea, but those examples, like the other ones, are very minimal. Cruise nightmare scenario number 4 maybe seems a little absurdist on the surface, but pirates are very real in certain parts of the cruising world. They're very real in the fact that sometimes when you go into pirate-infested waters or waters where known piracy is taking place, that you'll have to do special security measures while you're cruising. You may have to close the blinds for your cabin. You may have to take the lights out. Again, this is infrequent. I can't think of a cruise ship that has been overtaken by pirates, but there's certainly other vessels that have been overtaken by pirates, and it's significant enough that, there's a movie about one of those scenarios, Captain Phillips. And look, if you know me, you know that I'm more of a lover than a fighter. I don't really buy into levels of machismo. I'm pretty much hard on my sleeve. And so I'm okay saying that there has been a scenario on a cruise ship where I was a little less comfortable than normal. I don't know that I was straight out fearful. I would say it if I was straight out fearful, but I was, I had a raised eyebrow. I don't know where that is on the emotional spectrum, but there was a couple hours on a cruise ship where I was like, this seems abnormal. This doesn't seem right. I'm going to tell you what that is, but first let me invite you to subscribe. If you like staying up to date with everything going on in cruising, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you don't miss out on any of these episodes. We're trying to make our way to the next milestone, 250,000 subscribers. We just crossed 227,000 subscribers. A big welcome to the new members of the Loca fam, all you guys that have joined over the last few weeks. We are certainly glad to have you. Thanks everybody for helping us march on. Subscribe button's just below the video window. It doesn't cost anything, and it gets you notified when the show comes out. A big thank you in advance. The most trepidation I ever had on a cruise ship where I was somewhat concerned about the cruising experience takes me back to 2019 when I was in Shanghai in China preparing to board Royal Caribbean's Spectrum of the Seas. We'd spent 4 or 5 days in China at Shanghai Disney. Ironically, those days at Shanghai Disney were marked with beautiful and wonderful weather. Well, on the morning of the cruise, I was notified by email that I needed to get to the cruise port as soon as possible because the Spectrum of the Seas wanted to leave port early because a typhoon was bearing down on Shanghai Harbor, and we had planned to get out of there early enough to outrun the typhoon. And well, look, boarding a cruise ship in China, kind of a wild experience. It had a little bit of a militaristic feel to it. I had to surrender my passport, all under the shadow of this bearing down typhoon, but I did board the cruise ship. We did take off into the sea, and the seas got rough. Pretty quickly, they made an announcement that we were going to have some rocky weather for the next 12 hours, and that was correct. That was the first time I'd ever seen cruise ships place barf bags by all of the stairwells. I remember very vividly being in the theater and trying to leave the show and being thrown up into the air. It seems like a couple feet. I remember being at the buffet and the salt and pepper shakers sliding off of the table. And then I remember giving up on all of it and laying in my bed in my cabin and listening to the steel of the cruise ship creak under the pressure of what I thought was a storm that we were outrunning. It creaked. I mean, you could hear just metal. It wasn't bending, obviously, but the way that it sounded in your mind, I was imagining that it was metal bending. But yeah, it was a little freaky. 12 hours later, the seas were calm, and at the end of the cruise, we found out that we did not outrun the typhoon, that we weathered a typhoon. Just a Category 1 typhoon. Pretty big storm, though, but it overtook the ship, and we were in it. And yeah, that was, again, I don't think at any point did I feel like, oh, wow, this is, we could be in trouble. But it was the roughest seas that I'd ever been in. And a lot of people were sick, and a lot of people, you could feel the tension a little bit on that cruise ship. But yeah, that's a nightmare scenario, but it's all part of the cruise life. Just like any other activity that you participate in, there's opportunity for bad things to happen. But if you weigh the occurrences of bad things happening versus the occurrences of not bad things happening, you realize that the numbers flesh out that it's minimal. We don't live in a zero risk life in any aspect. Anything that you do in life, you could lock yourself in your house and still trip and fall, or drop a radio in a bathtub, something like that. But yeah, cruising, it's safe, but it's interesting when these nightmare scenarios play out. Have you ever been in a scary cruise ship scenario? I would love to hear your comment below. Thank you so much for checking out the show today. I certainly would encourage you to check out both Sharon at Sea and Jay from the Ship Life's videos about what's going down on the Carnival Pride. Interesting stuff. This is Tony for La Lido Loca, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido.